Welcome to this evening's Global Speaker Series discussion entitled Empowering and Supporting All Young People to Thrive. We're delighted to welcome everyone here to our Student Hub this evening, and also to welcome alumni and friends from around the world who are tuning in online tonight for our discussion. UCC's Global Speaker Series brings together experts from our alumni community with specialists from UCC to discuss topics of contemporary interest, exploring some of the opportunities and challenges facing our world today. We'd like to thank Deloitte for sponsoring UCC's Global Speaker Series in 2023-2024. This evening, we welcome our expert speakers, Ian Power and Professor Louise Crowley, who will be introduced to you shortly by the chair of tonight's discussion, Professor Fiona Kearney. So Fiona is the founding director of the Glucksman, and she's curated a number of exhibitions in Ireland and internationally with a particular emphasis on how contemporary art practice relates to research, particularly in academic contexts. Last year, the Glucksman won the prestigious European Art Museum Award. Throughout her career, Fiona has won several distinguished awards, including College Scholar, the NUI Prix d'Honneur from the French government, a UCC President's Award for Research, and the Jerome Hines Fellowship. Fiona has been a member of the Arts Council of Ireland and is currently a board member of both Cork Chamber and the Cork Midsummer Festival. Welcome, Fiona.
Wonderful to be here in the Dora Allman room in UCC's Hub building. And to have the privilege to welcome two people that I know well and have had the good fortune of working with. So I know that they're fabulous, but I'm going to tell you now just how fabulous they are. Because Ian Power, as Karen said, is CEO of spunout, which is Ireland's youth information and support platform, working towards a future where all young people are empowered and supported to thrive. Ian is an adjunct associate professor at UCD School of Psychology and vice chair of the National Implementation Monitoring Committee of Sharing the Vision, Ireland's national mental health policy. Ian is also an independent, non-executive director of Community Foundation Ireland and of the Citizens Information Board, and a former president of the National Youth Council of Ireland. He's a member of the National Advisory Council on Online Safety and also TikTok's European Safety Advisory Council. Ian has a particular interest in the area of juvenile justice and holds an advanced diploma in the subject from King's Inns, along with a US State Department Professional Fellowship in Juvenile Justice and the Rule of Law from Boston College. Of course, the most important thing is that he studied economics and politics at UCC from 2004 to 2009, and is in fact a former UCC Students' Union Deputy President. He was UCC Societies Guild President, editor of the UCC Express, and one of the things that I absolutely mostly appreciated about his time here, he's the founding editor of UCC's Motley magazine, which is still ongoing on campus today, and just a really wonderful publication. Ian completed the certificate and diploma in the company direction from the Institute of Directors in 2019, so we're really thrilled to have him with us today. You might give him a round. Thank you. And of course, it's also my great privilege to welcome Professor Louise Crowley, who is a dear colleague. Louise, of course, is in the School of Law in UCC, and she's a national voice on intimate partner violence, having published widely on the adequacy of legal responses to the challenges of gender-based violence, and works with service providers and state agencies to highlight the need for greater targeted investment in service provision. Louise was a member of the government-appointed expert group that developed the national framework to end sexual harassment and violence at third level, and she continues to advise on law and policy reform. At University College Cork, and I've been so empowered by this personally, Louise has developed the campus-wide bystander intervention programme. This educates and empowers staff and students to challenge the normalisation of sexual abuse and to recognise their role as pro-social bystanders to effect change and bring about a new normal of safety and respect. This training, which started here in UCC, is now being delivered in other third-level institutions, as well as workplaces and sporting organisations. In 2022, funded by the Irish Research Council, Louise developed a bespoke second-level programme, which is now being piloted in 50 secondary schools nationwide. Louise has just commenced a 14-month partnership with the Irish Defence Forces to deliver sexual respect and ethics training to members of the Army, the Air Corps and the Navy. So we are so privileged to have her as a colleague. And again, although she's at home, we might give her a feedback. So we're going to have a little chat, and we have some questions that we've kind of thought about, and then later on we're going to look at some of the questions. We have a huge number of questions submitted, so we'll look at those as well. And there's a lot of serious topics to be covered here, but I thought that perhaps we could start just by asking these two UCC alumni from a kind of personal perspective to speak to something that empowered them during their time at UCC. And Ian, you're the youngest, so I'm going to, you got the closest.
By a mile. Yeah, so I'm just thrilled to be back because so I came to UCC when I was 17. It took me a while to get rid of me, essentially, because I started in 2004 and didn't leave till 2010. And if anybody knows, arts is only 3 years, so that took a while. I think kind of what most empowered me, there's kind of two things that come to mind. One is when I got here, I kind of got the sense that the student voice was really valued and kind of anything was possible, which I felt was really liberating, kind of coming from secondary school, where maybe you're a little bit more curtailed in what you're allowed to do. So I felt that sense of independence was really empowering. And then as a young gay guy as well, at the time, 2004 was a bit different to 2023, even 2015, which was a wonderful time, obviously. And actually, linked to my earlier point, UCC was an incredibly welcoming place. I felt it was really inclusive. It didn't really matter. Everybody had a story and everybody was going through something. And I really kind of appreciated that. And that felt really empowering as well. So it was a wonderful kind of time to kind of, and to be honest, I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't have come here. You know, I know it's difficult to kind of think back on what could have or would have happened. But really, I felt, I'm a firm believer in kind of the right thing will happen for you at the right time, and I'm very grateful to UCC for that.
It's great, it definitely shapes us. And Louise, is there something that you can feel empowered you, maybe?
Well, firstly, just to say I'm smiling at your 2004 to 2010, because I started here in 1993, and bar 3 years to qualify as a solicitor, I'm still here in 2023. So I win. Yeah, definitely. So I started my BCL in 1993, but full transparency, I did my Leaving Cert twice. I didn't get the points for law in 1992, and I was very torn between my desire to get to UCC, which was such a burning ambition. I had a brother who was just finishing his degree, so we really wanted to spend a year together, but what was I going to do? And I narrowly accepted my first choice, which was arts, but then our second choice, but I didn't. I said, okay, it's only 1 year, and I repeated my Leaving Cert. So I always tell that to students who come into me in first year and say, but I can't change my mind now. And I say, you can, I did it, it's just 1 year. And they always find that very, I think, liberating. But anyway, I digress. I got law the second time. So when I came in, what struck me, two things, I suppose. One is the incredible camaraderie. There was about 100 of us doing law back then. We take in about 190 now, but there was exactly 100 in our year, I remember. And it was the friendships that we built so quickly and so profoundly, both socially but also academically. I remember in my final year studying with my friend Kathy in the hot press in her house in Kilcully. We were partners of study and we studied together for 4 years. It was just phenomenal. But I think the friendships that I made then, they made my 3 years here so special, and we are all still best friends to this day. And it's a testament to the value of any education platform, whether it's third level, whether it's PLC, wherever you go, that it is such, and when we all had shared interests in studying law, it was such a connection that lasts to this day, almost 30 years, and it's just powerful. And the other thing I think particularly, well, it's studying law, and I imagine shared across the disciplines, is that when you're doing your Leaving Cert, irrespective of how imaginative and I suppose creative your teachers will be, there is that CAO point system you have to work towards. And when I came to UCC, one of the first things we were asked was, what did we think of a case? And I was like, what do I think of the case? You mean, what do you think of the case? And I just think the joy of having the permission to think, to investigate, to explore, and to come up with your own ideas it was so enriching. And to this day, it is the joy of academia. And when I start a master's class every year, I say to them, I'm so jealous. You have 13 months to just dive in and explore and learn. And please enjoy it because you're the lucky ones. And so that's why I can still say I'm here 23 years later in UCC as an academic. And I still love coming in every day because of the joy of study and learning. And you never know everything. So yeah, so much joy and value.
I hope that our students who are on campus today get to experience both of those things.
Yeah.
It certainly seems to me, if anything, UCC is more inclusive. And certainly it's hugely important that we retain that as a value in our university. But I suppose we're in a world where there are really serious issues facing young people. And I just wonder if you could reflect for our audience online and here, Ian, and just from a social as well as a personal perspective, what you think those key issues might be?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there has been kind of commentary about young people and their resilience, and, there's derogatory terms thrown around sometimes around snowflake generation, all that sort of thing. I actually think this generation of young people are potentially the most resilient because of the amount of challenges that they're having to navigate. Like I can't even imagine what some of the issues, if I was trying to deal with those at 17, 18, like would I have had the coping skills to be able to grapple with them? So, kind of for me in our work in Spunout, our goal is to really try and support 16 to 34-year-olds with anything that they might be kind of struggling with. And we started up in 2004, actually. I wasn't there, obviously, at the time. I was here. And the motivation at the time was young people wanted to set up the organization to empower other young people around things like mental health literacy, around things like sexual health, and things that weren't necessarily in the classroom. Arguably, I don't know if folks saw Richie Sadler's documentary on RTE recently, like it's still not actually happening in the classroom, which is a bit devastating to kind of understand. But that was kind of a moment then, and I think it's evolved over time. Our kind of focus in Spunout is that we're by young people, for young people, and by that, we have young people all around Ireland who contribute to telling us what it's like to be a young person in Ireland at the moment. And then our team then work to try and develop the resources to support them to kind of deal with some of those challenges. And we run a 24/7 texting helpline, so it's really important from our perspective that young people are met where they are. So that means, we're reaching them on TikTok, we're talking to them on WhatsApp, and they're texting us at 2 or 3 in the morning when they've had kind of maybe the first opportunity to put the head on the pillow, and they're trying to sort through all their thoughts. And kind of the top issues that young people are struggling with, those kind of feelings of anxiousness, feelings of stress, and around 1 in 5, 1 in 6 young people are talking to us about suicide and kind of self-harm issues, and really like that's devastating. Like we should we should be kind of alleviating some of the pressures that we're placing on young people, and there's a lot of kind of conversation around mental health services and everything, which is a really important conversation to have, and I'm sure we'll touch on them as we discuss this evening. But we need to zoom out a little bit and think about what are the pressures we're placing on young people, what are the needs, the basic needs that they are not having met, and how do we kind of disrupt some of the challenges that they're experiencing, So for me, we talk about the Leaving Cert, like it's a huge pressure, and to what end, we talk about kind of the housing crisis. There's a number of young people in our organization at the moment developing a campaign around that so that they can share young people's voices on it, because arguably young people are really at a thin end of the wedge in relation to that issue, because they're trying to move out, they're trying to develop their sense of independence, and it's really challenging. Even I'm sure students at UCC now are struggling to kind of find that accommodation or living at home for longer periods. The average age of moving out now is 29, which is kind of it's something that we don't really reflect on a huge amount. So for me, I guess kind of it's a melting pot of issues, and I think it's about trying to zoom out and think about those in maybe a different way, because I think a lot of the time we put the emphasis on maybe you know, young people not being able to cope, but actually should they be expected to cope, you know? So I think that's just something that comes up for me kind of day to day in our work.
Hugely important work. Thank you, Ian. I suppose, Louise, you know, you see it as well from a different perspective with your students and obviously with the work that you do. What would your sense of those kind of key issues that are coming up?
Yeah, so one of the issues that really strikes me, and I see this with the students here in UCC, is a reluctance to show weakness and a reluctance to seek out help. So from an academic perspective, every year we would see students and they just sort of disappear. And it's kind of February or March before we realize they come to us and realize there's a crisis. And actually that was one of the reasons behind my very early motivation for the bystander training program, because back in 2015-16, I was dean of the director of the BCL program, which would be our largest intake in law. And I was very conscious that the students didn't really have a voice. And in my work as a professor of law, in the area of family law, very conscious of the silencing of the voice of the child in legal proceedings, whether it's private family law proceedings and perhaps custody or access cases, or child law proceedings where the state is intervening, or even domestic violence criminal cases where the voice of the child isn't heard. And it's very problematic because the welfare of the child is to be so significant, and yet the child's needs or voices, it comes through the conflicting parents. So, you know, that's a big part of the work that I do. But within the university context, I remember that November, I emailed all 163 students and said, look, my door is literally open for the week. If anybody wants to come talk about anything personal, academic, any challenges you have, this is the time to do it. I can probably help you with most issues. Let's deal with it now. And it's early doors in the semester and we can thrive together. And 8 students came to see me out of 163, and they were all girls, all women. And I was A, conscious that was a very small number, and B, where were the men? So with that in mind, you know, I was very conscious, and I spoke to colleagues across the university about, as you said, going to meet the students where they were at and helping them to realize that there are no judgments when they come forward. In fact, we recognize and respect their bravery in coming forward to a person in authority who has an influence on their academic marks, how they're perceived as a student, and that would be different also in the context of perhaps medicine or psychology or social work, where there is a work element or a capacity for work. And I fear that students are hiding behind their challenges, afraid to come forward. So I mean, I commend UCC for all the work that it does, and it's testament to the support I've received in developing the bystander program, whereby we take a real honest view and work to understand the world in which our students live, what their lived reality is. And, you know, it isn't for us to presume. We need to ask them, what are the challenges and how can we help? It's as simple as that. How can we help? And what do you need the university to put in place? So, I mean, I would agree with all that Ian has said about the challenges that young people face. And, you know, as a university, I have said this to the president, that I feel we have a moral obligation as a university, as educators, as informed, you know, educators who have all of these 26,000 students right in front of us, and they're sponges and they want to learn and they want to be shown and helped to be directed where they need it. You know, that where we have the skills across all of our disciplines and all of our capacities, why wouldn't we create the structures and the frameworks and supports that they need and hear them and respond to their needs? And we have always had wonderful student union bodies who will come to us and will tell us exactly what they want, and it's just so critical that we respond, and I think we do generally as a university really listen to them and respond.
Thank you, Louise. And it's very interesting to come back to actually something you said about that kind of moment that the university gives you, like in terms of time to explore and to think,
yes,
and maybe to kind of navigate things in a different way, because you're suddenly kind of encountering a much wider world. Yeah. But if that wider world is full of these kind of really, you know, serious challenges and you know, quite daunting issues, I suppose one of the things that we have to do is to enable and empower young people to thrive. And I'm just wondering, how can we, you know, support them to have that kind of agency? And I'll come to Louise first, because is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Again, it's really important that we don't get lost and stuck in our discipline as a student or as an academic, because obviously our primary job perhaps as educators is to ensure that students are fully informed in their discipline and can project from whatever degree they're completing into the next stage in their career, whatever that might look like. And it's wonderful because it's so varied. More than half of our law students do not pursue a career, for example, in the professions of law. They do a multiple, and it's wonderful to see. But I suppose in terms of empowering our students, well, for me, and I will always say this, education is the foundation of all of our growth, whether it's academically, professionally, personally, spiritually, however it may be. And so understanding that as academics and people working within the university, academics and otherwise, that we have so much to teach and to develop other than the academic discipline. So, I mean, I would say that I had this mad notion back in 2015, and it's not my job. You know, I'm a professor in the law school, but I really recognize this need to provide students with the opportunity to be empowered with both information and skills in the area of sexual harassment and violence, because this is their lived reality. Unfortunately, we know the prevalence. We heard the other day about in the CSO stats, 50% of 18 to 24-year-olds had experienced sexual harassment in the last 12 months. I mean, it's just horrific that this is their everyday, you know, the hostility that within which they have to operate and navigate the world. But the university, you know, supported me. I did ask some hairy questions at the beginning, like if a student is sexually assaulted, what happens? And they were like, ooh. But then, you know, slowly, catchy monkey and all that. And I got the university to understand that we can and we will use our position as educators within the academic context, but within the broader social context within which the university is positioned to educate through knowledge, but also then through skill development and peer learning. So to a point I can give information, but then I hand it over to the participants in the training and they empower themselves through peer conversation and peer endorsement to learn, to develop, to grow confidence and to recognize their capacity for contribution. So whilst I plant the seed, I'm not the one doing the doing, they are. And for me, that's really critical because the agency of our students is so important, but we have such a role to play in terms of education. Give them the information, and in my area, there's such an absence of adequate information, and you spoke to the, you know, the real shortcomings of the second level RC programs and the reluctance to, again, recognize the lived reality of our 15 and 16-year-olds. Okay, it might be illegal to have sex until you're 17, but some young people are having sex and some young people are engaging in sexual activity, so we just block our ears, or do we help them and support them to make good choices? So, you know, again, I've managed to work with second level schools, and what I would say too is that just like in third level, the second level teachers have been phenomenal. You know, I have a school in Cork where 10 teachers trained to deliver bystander training to their students. And they queued up to do the training, they came to our sessions and they delivered the training to the young people. And I've heard how the young people have used the training. So I suppose it all comes back to empowering, and we should never underestimate young people's desire for knowledge, the appetite to know and to know how to, because it's very hard, and we've all experienced this, I've no doubt, to live in a vacuum of knowledge, and the fear that that instills because you just don't know what's going to happen, and if something happens you don't know what to do. So let's give the information and let's empower people and let them be as brilliant as they can be.
Yeah, could I come to you, because obviously you spun out as this youth information you know, and support platform, and if knowledge is power, it really is so important that we are giving them the information and knowledge to empower them. Is, you know, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the foundation piece. I think like everyone needs to have the information that they need to kind of understand. And then I think the second piece to that, the next layer, is voice. And, you know, for me, there's two aspects to that. So one is being able to kind of talk and articulate and understand how it is that you're actually feeling. What are your thoughts and desires? What's your purpose? Who do you know, where do you belong? Who do you connect to? Who do you want to connect to? And what's kind of, it shouldn't be so remarkable, but kind of when young people are talking to us through the WhatsApp kind of service, you know, the amount of young people who will say kind of, oh gosh, I didn't realize this is how good it feels to feel heard, do you know? And the people doing the listening are other young people. So, you know, what's powerful about that is young people listening to other young people and empowering them to feel heard, have their voices and their feelings validated. Because I think the second part of it then is for me that young people share their experiences, right? So many young people experience the same issues, and no one is, and it's completely understandable. No one's confident enough necessarily to put up their hand and say, I'm feeling this way. Because I can guarantee you, when we create the spaces for that to happen, every other young person puts up their hand and says, it may not be the exact same experience, we all have different experiences, but they can relate to it in some way, and there's a feeling there. So for me, kind of the two parts are, how do we kind of help young people to find their own voice, and then how do we help young people to share that with others and other young people, to help other young people feel less alone with their problems. That's kind of what we hear a lot from different groups of young people, is that I struggled for so long feeling alone, and it's the isolation that really is the difficult part. And I can understand that from a lot of different kind of perspectives, whether you're an LGBTQ plus young person, whether you're a young person who's new to Ireland in some way or different, it can feel really isolating. Whereas when you can bring young people together with those relatable experiences, there's empowerment in that, and it breaks down kind of some of those societal kind of pieces that feel oppressive,
And that's so commendable, and that's what we want, but it doesn't always happen that way. I just, kind of, because I think there are still a lot of kind of tribal affiliations within any society, within, the worlds that our students inhabit. And so you might have public and private kind of feelings, but you also have kind of certain tribes that don't allow for those conversations or relatability to even develop. And is there things that we can do, either in our role as educators, in our role to really, I suppose, empower young people who are maybe more stuck in those spaces that aren't as listening and that aren't as open, to navigate into places where they might feel heard?
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to help young people to navigate and find those spaces and find those places. For me, it's about young people being able to understand and relate to other young people. And, often if we see young people struggling, it's probably because, there's kind of that lack of feeling like they belong, feeling of connection. Maybe it's feeling like, what's my purpose? I really haven't figured that out yet. So Jigsaw, which is a primary care kind of mental health service for young people, they've a great kind of research body around that one good adult piece, which is around kind of having a rock that you can always go to, kind of no matter what the issue is. And what they found is that the one good adult, if a young person has a one good adult, that their resilience, their kind of all of their indicators around their well-being are at a heightened where compared to young people who don't have that one good adult. So I kind of think that's the first thing. And then in the second place, I think we really have to kind of challenge a lot of the kind of the oppressive kind of societal kind of structures and systems that we have. Because, I was talking to a clinical psychologist from Manchester recently, just around his practice working with LGBT young people. And, he was practicing CBT, and, young people were talking to him about social safety theory, which is that piece around, well, actually, when I'm on the street late at night, I don't actually feel very safe. And, that makes me feel quite anxious. And what was interesting was that he was kind of challenged in the sense that, well, that's a perfectly valid, feeling of anxiety to have. And so we're not going to try and minimize that, or that's not something for you to work on. That's for everyone else to work on. And so really, I think kind of we all, just as the bystander intervention program has demonstrated, we all kind of have a role to play in breaking those down and understanding what those are, and making sure that we're not ignorant to them, so that we can start to improve things. And things are getting a bit better, but there are always going to be inflection moments, and there's always going to be flashpoints. And I think those are the most important times that we understand and we're kind of engaged enough to be kind of active in trying to be that signpost for young people.
Louise, can I come to you, because I just think you've pioneered so much work that has really started to rattle, undo, carve huge pathways through the systems
that aren't working for young people. I mean, some systems are great, but you know,
Yeah.
some of our systems aren't. And you mentioned earlier even about that idea of the court of law and how daunting that can be for,
Yeah.
for young people. And
So just picking up on a couple of things Ian said, I think in terms of society's role and us as individuals, but also us as a collective in society to try and break down those silos and those challenges that absolutely exist. I think one of the first things that I work on with people is the identification piece. So you're never going to break something down or make an intervention or take a stand or support somebody if you can't identify the problematic situation that they're facing. So for me, this goes back to education and awareness and moving outside our own world and our blinkered world and recognizing those around us, but also recognizing the challenges that perhaps we might not face individually, but that other people are experiencing. And that requires us to develop that awareness. So in my world, it's recognizing all forms of abuse, for example. So you might obviously know that rape and aggravated sexual assault is horrific, but you also need to know that whistling at a woman running down the road is also outrageous and should not be tolerated. And there should be no threshold of, oh, well, that's okay, but we will stop here. So similarly, I think with societal unease and challenges and difficulties, it's really on all of us to be aware. So whether you're a school teacher, whether you're an academic, whether you're a sports coach, you know, whether you're the neighbor, whoever you are, I think we all need to face up to our obligations societally to those who are vulnerable around us. And it's too easy to walk on by and think, oh, the next person will deal with it, or I don't really relate to them, or it's not really a problem, you know. And I think I was really struck by what you said, Ian, about people thinking, well, I'm the only one with this challenge. And that's something that's shared across all of societal issues, because young people in particular will think, well, I'm the only one who obviously is uncomfortable here, or I'm the only one in first law who doesn't fit in. But actually, we know from our research that most people in a room will share these challenges. You know, when I'm giving a lecture, I always say to students, if you have a question, ask it, because I can guarantee you 20 people in the room have the same question. And it's just getting people to realize there are so many shared challenges. And once we can provide a platform for people to share on a peer-based level, oh, I've seen it. I've seen people kind of jaws dropping and realizing they're in a group of like-minded people who feel the same way, but they never knew. And it's that pluralistic ignorance that you're the only one who's concerned or you're the only one who's affected. And so I really firmly believe that we need to provide safe spaces for young people and present them with the opportunity to talk. So in our workshops, you know, we present fictional scenarios, but we have crafted them. So if it's the GA club we're giving a session to, we might talk about a trip away to Kerry on the bus and imagine if this happened, or imagine if this happened, or if we're in, you know, college, we do something about going out and you're on College Road on a Friday night, and, you know, and we enter their worlds, but we do it in a sort of an abstract fictional way. So they speak very freely about how that would make them feel, or how they think their friends might react. And suddenly they're talking to each other about how they're actually living. So it's not impossible, but really we have to make an effort. We have to craft these ways to allow people to feel safe. And, you know, I have seen it in front of my eyes, you know, young people over a 6-week period breaking down those barriers and understanding each other's lives. And in particular, I've seen young men who socialize with their peers in the class, and, you know, over the course of 6 weeks, their jaws drop. They don't realize what it's like for their female classmate to go out on a Saturday night alongside them and have a completely different experience. And I've seen them grow in the 6 weeks from kind of, oh my God, really? And by the end of the 6 weeks, they are allies. And they will tell me they now go out and they watch for them and they see what's happening. It's that awareness piece. They now understand the impact of what happens if somebody grabs them inside in the pub, and they know what to do to make them safe without any big confrontation. And I think that that's transferable across so many issues. And it's just so satisfying to see them grow and learn and be empowered. And then, because they come back to me and they tell me what they're doing with these skills, and they're really making a difference. So, and I think they're so delighted to support each other. And we should never underestimate how much they want to do that, because everybody sees them. So even the cool, fabulous kids see themselves sometimes in the vulnerability. And, you know, it's really important that we kind of level things out a bit and get young people to help each other. So I really believe that it's within our capacities, and particularly in a university setting, as I said, with 26,000 students, this is our chance to, at this youngish age for them, you know, to not just learn how to be a great lawyer or a great medic or, you know, a great whatever they're studying, but actually to develop holistically and to be a stronger person with a sense of moral responsibility to the people around them, strangers or people they know. And that's how we change society, and we instill this desire to be part of the change.
I mean, it's really been extraordinary to see that program, flourish in that way. And I kind of wonder if we need a bystander intervention for all the various issues that we have, because
Give me a break.
yeah, I know. But for me anyway, this kind of generation of students that we have are incredibly serious about wanting to change the world. They're almost not giving themselves that chance to just take a break.
Yeah.
And kind of go college is actually for a little bit more of a time to explore, but there's an urgency there for them, which means they feel they can't take that break, and so they're coming to us with questions about how can we affect this change, this meaningful change that we need to see in the world now, not tomorrow, and and I'm wondering, in the context of, it's so important that we enable them to be themselves and to be able to feel heard, but they also want an agency. They want to, and obviously they can follow your example, Louise, and I really hope that they will and do, but what are the things that we can be doing for them to really help them to succeed with that difference they want to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is around understanding that your voice that you have now is equal to every other person's voice. Like there's no kind of extra credit for experience in years. You know what I mean? Like other generations don't have the answers to everything, and if they did, we'd have all solved everything by now. So like for me, like young people are incredibly inspiring, and they give me so much hope because I really do feel like they have the urgency and the creativity and the energy to actually maybe tackle some of these problems. And I think what's happened is we've moved from, and I think it's brilliant that we've made the leap from empathy to compassion, right? So young people are not just understanding the issues and understanding kind of what other people are going through. They're understanding the injustice, and they're compelled to act to kind of minimize it. For, like, what's remarkable, for, categories that they do not fit into themselves, And I think that what we have to do is encourage that and help them to develop the skills within which to kind of change the world. And in many ways, like, if you look at young people like School Fridays for Future, and that movement, which is totally grassroots, it's made governments around the world do things that, many different lobby groups have not been able to do after years of effort. And I think we have to just really try and encourage that. And I think as well, for me, like our role in spunout is to empower young people to develop those skills and to go off and use those skills in different ways. And I think there's no arguing, like and it's unfortunate, and we see it in the media, but you see folks having to kind of share their own story in order to affect change. And unfortunately in Ireland, sometimes I think that is the only way to affect change, and that's a shame, and that shouldn't be how it is. But young people are incredibly gifted and powerful at doing that, sharing their stories, and I think that is making huge differences in many different kind of spheres of society. And so in terms of agency, to be honest, I kind of feel like young people have a lot of agency, which is great. I feel like my generation, perhaps we kind of waited a little bit to feel like we needed it to be given to us. I think that, this generation of young people don't feel that way from what they say, and I think that's wonderful. And so for me, it's just about how do we support them? Because one of the things I am worried about is burnout, and kind of that feeling of that urgency that we need to solve all of the problems now, which I think is on the left side wonderful, and then on the right side, individually that's really challenging. And I think that's why we see those issues around, young people's concern around climate, for example, and other things. And people dismiss that, and I think that's a really big mistake. I think we shouldn't dismiss or kind of minimize young people's anxiousness around something that's quite existential to all of us, firstly, but also something that they're compassionate about, that they have this sense of injustice about, and that they want to do something about as well, so.
I I love that sense of, you know, that that empowerment that they have, that agency that they have, that is kind of awakened much earlier. And of course, I'm going to say this, Louise, but I really commend some of the ways in which you've gone about that. It's not always been about, you know, let's do it through the kind of formal teaching. You've developed so many brilliant ways of communication, and from what I know about spunout, you've used as well multiple different ways, because you know, different people are going to need different points of connection. And I come from the art world, and one of the things that I love about it, it tends to be non-verbal. But there's huge power in that, in how people might express themselves.
And it's really important to meet people where and how they want to do that. So we have a digital badge for the bystander program here in UCC. So participants, staff and students complete the online piece for about 3 hours, self-directed, and then we have an in-person workshop, which is really where the magic happens, because they get to talk about it and they hear other people who have similar views. And anyway, it's really great, and they talk about different ways to intervene, but then they have to do a reflective piece to get their credit from the university. And of course, the lawyer in me, when I created the digital badge, said, and you'll write 1,000 words and tell us what you thought. And then I had all these brilliant, you know, scientists and you know, English scholars and medics in the room, and I was thinking, oh, maybe not. So then we invited them to create whatever manifestation of the impact of the learning on them. And we've had poetry, and we've had songs, and we've had sculpture, we've had little screenplays, we've had, you know, advocates banners created, as well as beautiful written reflections. And so it's about allowing people to express the power they feel, the agency they feel, and their personal capacity, as well as, I will obviously say, some very challenging reflections from people who've participated and completed the training who are survivors, victim survivors of sexual violence. And that is very powerful and very searing in terms of, I suppose, my own, you know, realization. You know, sometimes I'll admit you get caught up in the academic research and the conferences and the advocacy and the creating the training. And then you're grounded again when a student comes to you or someone comes to you with their story. And it's a very important reminder of why we're doing what we're doing. But also, I do know when I started the program, I was very concerned about re-victimizing people. But when I did my risk management work in advance, I was repeatedly told by support agencies that you'll find the survivors are your greatest advocates. And that's exactly what I found, is that some of our strongest student ambassadors are people who will openly share willingly their experiences and talk about, if only people had been empowered when I was in my vulnerable state. And thank you for allowing people to learn what it is, learn the impact, and also learn maybe they're in a toxic relationship right now and they didn't realize, or maybe they were raped and they didn't realize and they were self-blaming. So again, it goes to that power of education, not only to empower to act, but also to empower yourself as an individual to navigate whatever experiences you might have had. And that was something I hadn't quite anticipated, but now I've come to really learn the value of that for individuals who I've been working with.
You know, what I'm hearing from both of you, though, is an extraordinary ability that you have to adapt and learn, and to reflect that back. Because I think, you know, if we want to genuinely give that sense of agency, they have to say, we don't have the answers, but we want to learn, and we're here to learn too. And I remember one time we had a workshop organised for young people in direct provision. We were delighted. We'd gone to, you know, we were so excited to be welcoming them with buses and food and all the art materials. And they came into the gallery just down here on the campus, and all they wanted to do was run around the lower grounds. Of course, all they wanted to do was run around the lower grounds. And, you know, we were like, you know, well, we'll just follow them out. And we did a partnership with Scouting Ireland and with Folter refugees here to enable them to do creative activities around our beautiful campus. And why siphon them into a room when their lives are contained in that way? And I think that's what we have to do, is to lean into the extraordinary young people that we have on campus to kind of create a good continuum forward of different space and different learning, and that we could still be a little bit young at heart.
Join them in running around.
We're still learning, and we're still on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think as well, like, you know, this generation are grabbing, you know, the authority. They're not waiting for it necessarily, but there are groups of people for whom maybe that is not possible, and that's not true as well. And just when you're kind of given that example, one of the things when we set up the texting service, we really wanted to make sure that it was accessible and that young people in the traveller community would use the service. And so rather than kind of, you know, think of things ourselves. We went directly to young people and said, from the traveler community, and said, what would make you use this service? Like, tell us your experience and tell us what would make it more comfortable. And they were saying to us that, well, I want to know that the person who's talking to me understands what my life is actually like. Because in order for somebody to empathize with me, I need to know that there's a full and true understanding that they've gotten to know. So we worked with Pavi Point to develop a training for all of our volunteers. And it's young travelers talking to camera. They're kind of describing their lives, describing what a day-to-day kind of experiences is. They're describing the kind of the racism they experience, how that manifests itself on a daily basis for them. And like, that's really been powerful. And we see an overrepresentation of young travelers in our numbers compared to the CSO figures, because I feel that, you know, young people, when they are in that space where they need to talk to somebody, they know that, okay, I'm going to reach out to a safe space here. I'm going to reach out to somebody who actually has taken the time to understand what my life is like. And I think we need to do that, you know, when we're talking about agency, I think we need to do that for all young people, and young people who are experiencing various different barriers to participation.
I think that's just a beautiful way to bring our live stream to a close, with that sense of safe spaces. And
You know, I just, before we close it, I want to say thank you to UCC alumni, particularly to Karen Kelly, for organising this evening and allowing us to connect with hopefully some young people and certainly a number of graduates who will come back to UCC, which should be a safe, enjoyable and exploratory space for our graduates. So thank you to everyone for joining us online. But